Hello and welcome to Reiki Women Podcasts. I'm Bronwen Logan, and today I have with me, as always, the lovely, whichever side it comes up on, the lovely Michaela Daystar. Hello, Michaela. And
Hello,
yeah, Carrie can't make it today, so it's going to be you and me hanging out, and we're going to be chatting about exactly that, compassion. So, as you said the minute we decided to do this, I think I need to do this today. Go for it, Michaela.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I mean, practicing compassion today.
Compassion. I mean, this is really what it's all about, right? I mean, the system of Reiki is really guiding us gently and through so many different perspectives and processes and angles to the realization that, the foundation of this is compassion, is love. Love for ourselves, love for each other, for the land, for the web of life itself. And that truly, that sensation of compassion inside of ourselves, and then the actions that we take in response to that sensation are just really what this is about. It's what healing stems from and how we experience it. And so often when I'm working with myself, when I'm working with others on this question of what does it mean to embody the precepts, we'll look at, which one of these feels a little challenging to us today, or where do we feel that we have some work to do? Where's the stickiness in our relationship to the precepts? And more often than not, it's that fifth precept, just for today, I'm compassionate with myself and others, that people are drawn to. It's often the one I'm drawn to as one that's both the most compelling and also often so very challenging.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the questions that, really floated to the surface when we talked about, working with the fifth precept, working with the concept of compassion in this conversation, is like, where does that struggle come from? Why can it be that we can find it so challenging to experience, oftentimes, mostly that compassion for ourselves, and then from there, that compassion to others? And why is it that this is the foundation of the system? So those are the questions that came up for me. And
yeah, I think, you sort of hit the nail on the head there with the, compassion for ourselves. And though it might seem like it's a world out there that we need to be compassionate for and to, it starts with ourselves. And I was just thinking about that this morning, that inner voice, and the critical inner voice that is constantly trying to talk to you and say, I don't know, all the things that, you might not be good enough, or you might, I don't know what all those things are that we speak to ourselves about. And in a way, we're reaffirming those thoughts about ourselves when we have that inner voice running in our head. So I can see really clearly the benefit then of meditation, because what we're doing when we meditate, so say we're doing, Joshin Kokyoho, that, take that as a simple practice, that, we're breathing down into the hara, feeling it fill the hara. Then as we breathe out, feel it expanding. In doing that, we are training our mind to follow what we want it to do. I mean, it's a really simple thing, but it's something that actually we find incredibly difficult to do. So, because, when that voice is talking at us and saying all these things to us that, maybe other people have said to us in the past, or maybe, we've come to some conclusions about it, whatever the story is that's playing out in here, how we leave that behind, I think that is incredibly difficult. And if we can allow that to quieten, to not be as loud, to not be as forceful, then it gives us the opportunity to really allow our light to shine and be that beautiful, great, bright light that we all are. So, yeah, I think, for me, I think it's definitely meditation practice is the thing that is the guiding light there for me, at any rate, that it is training me to be able to let go and not follow that, to be able to say to myself no, and back into to being here, and trying to be as present as you possibly can without running away with all those thoughts. We've talked before about imprinting, and I do think it's like we're imprinting ourselves constantly with these things. So we can do, we can also imprint the practice of meditation.
Yeah.
And so we do the opposite of what we're subconsciously doing. Consciously, we imprint into ourselves how to listen and learn to focus for longer periods of time, rather than focus on being here together, us. Yeah.
Well, it's so important to name, as you just did, this like habitual, like internal negative self-talk that we learn, right? The habitual self-criticism, the habitual inability to see ourselves fully and completely, because there are parts that we don't necessarily like, or that have been criticized by others outside of ourselves or by the culture at large. And this habitual way that we filter the world through the things that we see wrong, first and foremost with ourselves, and then that gets projected onto everybody else. And that the way in which we can't fully love ourselves if we can't fully see the fullness of of who we are. And so within the system of Reiki, this invitation to remember our whole self, remember our true self, and that involves looking at parts of ourselves that we might not like, that we've been criticized for, that others might see as bad or wrong, that we might see as bad or wrong, mistakes we've made, decisions we've made that we regret, that full spectrum of who we are, that takes into account, not just the parts that we'd rather look at. And when we can't do that, when we're not able to look at those parts and we disregard those parts, or we constantly are trying to fix them and judge them, then we don't actually have the capacity to regard ourselves with compassion. And we are going to constantly try to either, lash out at other people, or on the other side of that, constantly attempt to fix everybody, to fix everything, so that we can kind of bring that equilibrium back that we're off of, because we're not fully integrating ourselves.
Yeah.
And so this practice that we have, that we've taken on into our lives, gives us the opportunity, first of all, to settle through meditation, as you just said, to really settle into ourselves, to gently bring our attention back inward, gently bring our attention back to whatever it is that we're experiencing in that moment, even the parts that we don't want and that we don't like. And then put softness around that, put gentleness around that, put spaciousness around that. Look at those parts of ourselves with a non-judgmental eye, with a non-dualistic eye that doesn't see those parts of ourselves as strictly good or strictly bad, but simply the spectrum of experience that we have. And then that sensation of making more room inside of ourselves to hold all of it, and ultimately to integrate these various parts of ourselves. Yeah. And, it's a slow and gentle process when we work with that, to come into a habitual state of positive self-regard. And then from that state to be able to flow that outward to other people. It's a very natural outpouring to be able to love other people with no strings attached, with no conditions, with no, fixing or changing that needs to happen. When we are settled in ourselves, when we feel rooted, we feel grounded, we feel stable in who we are, because we've given ourselves room to be, the fullness of who we are. And there's a little bit of a paradox there in saying that, like, by accepting and loving our full self, that, that's where we begin to change and heal, right? As opposed to obsessively trying to fix and change things that we see wrong with ourselves and with others, but in the absence of that self-love, as if we have to fix and perfect ourselves before we're worthy of loving ourselves, which is something that, many of us fall into, a trap that many of us fall into. And so, these practices that we have, just beginning with that foundational one of Jushin Kokyu-ho, like, gives us the space to make that change in ourselves gently.
Yeah, I love that. That's the idea of spaciousness is really, I mean, I feel that, it's such a great word, isn't it? Because or spaciousness, because it you can feel it, and you can sense what it means to have that. And it, reminds me always of this, of the idea of being the empty cup that allows the resonance to happen. So, if everything's cluttered in the cup, obviously no resonance. So, it's removing the clutter and allowing ourselves to sit in that spaciousness and resonate with everything, which is that natural flow, and being in that lovely natural flow. I was thinking also, as you were talking about the precepts, and in reality, I mean, we always do say that they affect one another, and we can really see that with compassion. Yeah. So, starting off with, for today, so really, being in that present moment, and just being here, and living without anger, living without worry, feeling that sense of gratitude that you were sort of talking about before, and just really linking into who you really are, being that true self, and then allowing that compassion then to flow through those filters. So, allowing those elements to help us to be whole. Yeah. I was also thinking about so the precept, be compassionate to yourself and others. So in Japan, in the full sentence, so in Japanese it's hito ni shinsetsu ni. Hito is the Japanese word for self, but even though that's literally what it is, it actually means self and others. Because the Japanese have this lovely way of not seeing us as this little cookie cutter person, and that understanding that, we all exist here together, and we all need to work together, and, existence is us all in existing with everything together in this space. So even though it might say self, it's not really just about the self. And there was another word actually that also means self, and it in Japanese, which is jibun, and it actually means one's share. So it's like, this is my share of everything. Yeah. So I am a part of everything. And that's the word self again, right? So, self, it's not just about me. It's about me being here with everything. And it's also, that word jibun also means you, in the sense of when someone is close to you, then they're like a part of you. So even though it's the word self, it also refers to people who, that intimacy that we have, and with each other, and how special that is. So I think that's really beautiful how the Japanese can, this is a Japanese practice. So, looking at how they would see that these precepts would work for us. And so hito, being self and others, naturally being others, if it's about the self, it can never just be about us, is really important. And also how the Japanese speak, in the sense of that they don't necessarily talk so much about themselves. They say things like, so if I'm feeling happy, then if I were to translate that, I would say something like, happy it is. I wouldn't say I'm happy.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, I'm throwing it out there. Happy. It is, right? And it's like, so I'm feeling that, right? But, maybe
Right.
it's something that there's obviously more than just, it's not just about me. And, perhaps we're all happy, or, maybe we're picking up on each other's happiness, we're existing in this.
There's this state of being that is happy, and we're all connected to it, and then can express it and feel it in different moments. Yeah. It's like this perspective that you're speaking to, and that we cultivate when we're practicing the system of Reiki. It makes us bigger, right? Or it makes us aware of our spaciousness, of our bigness. And there's a certain forgiveness and I don't know, it's like, it feels like almost an antidote to self-shaming behaviors, to think of ourselves as bigger than just this one self, right? That there's my experience, and that can include a lot of difficulty and perhaps shame for things that I've done, or disappointments and all of these things. And if it's just me and my experience, all of that is so concentrated. It's so focused on my experience. But when I widen the lens, and I sense, I feel in my body and in myself through practice, my interconnection with the rest of life, with the web of life, I start to feel bigger. I start to feel more spacious. And all of a sudden, those tiny little concerns, those shames, those things that, I might feel so badly about myself, that make me so unlovable to myself sometimes, it's like they diffuse. They go into this pool of something much, much bigger, and they just matter less, in a certain sense. And that feels so important, because there's such a crippling impact to experiencing shame and dislike of ourselves. And it's so common. It's so widespread that we walk around, feeling small and constricted around these aspects of ourselves that we don't like.
Yeah.
And it causes so much suffering. There's the pain of whatever experience we've had, but then there's the suffering of continuing to dwell on it and to punish ourselves for it. And then to project that onto other people in all of these creatively wide range of ways that we project our shame and dislike onto other people. That it's such a simple remedy to that, to practice this sensation of being bigger and more spacious and more connected than we often experience ourselves to be, making more room for love, for self-regard, for positive self-regard. And there's so many different ways of getting to that sensation. And one of them is by really expressing generosity and gratitude to other people. So again, that connection to gratitude, that connection to releasing our attachment to being afraid, to being angry. Again, that connection between the precepts, the way they work together to bring us to this state of interconnection, of non-duality, and of ultimately love.
Yeah. I think, that idea that we are, just the word hito, like we were saying, meaning others as much as self, brings us immediately to that sense of compassion and love. Because, and also if we are just that one share of everything, then we all are sharing the same things. And, so we, as you say, when we focus first on ourselves and feel that, give ourselves love, yeah, and feel that love for ourselves, that immediately is shared out and shared around. And we're also sharing all the pain and the shame and the, you know, so it's us understanding others simply by being more aware of who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, Bronwen, like for somebody who has a hard time expressing love and compassion for themselves, you know, that person for whom that precept is so hard, who maybe finds it easy to you know, express care and concern for others, but really struggles to apply that to their own self, that just is in so much shame and self-judgment as a way of being, as a normal way of being. You know, jumping full on into, you know, I love myself, I'm compassionate for myself and others, can be a big leap, right?
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you would suggest people start if they're in that space.
You know, I would use a different part of the system of Reiki, and often, you know, people will come, for example, to me and say, oh, you know, I studied Reiki a long time ago. I'd like to get back in it. You know, I've been having problems or whatever, and I'd like to see it working for me, but I can't, you know, I think for people, you know, if you're not really practicing a lot or whatever, and maybe you're in pain and you don't know how to get out of that, and you know, it can be really overwhelming to say, oh, you know, I'm going to do this practice and this practice and this practice, right? But you know, well, obviously I would suggest to keep the precepts in your mind, just as a really, just to, you know, just to keep them there, just to keep them there. And even though you may not, you know, we don't all, we try, but you know, we're not perfect, so we're not getting that, you know, we're not necessarily always enacting them, but they're there in our heads, in our mind. And so having them in your mind. But I do think that very simple act of hands-on healing is a beautiful way to feel connected to yourself. You know, we lose that connection, and I think physicality is really important for that. So that can really, if we start, it's sort of like the fundamental thing, isn't it? It's like when we do any of our practices, we work with the hara, you know, and it is a number of things, you know, it's original energy, but it's also that earthing, that physicality, that first stop, that first place, because we live in this incredibly physical world. And so taking that physicality, you know, once again, you know, I could be sort of strict, and I could say, you know, you have to do it this way, and you should do all of this, and you need to sit like this, and you need to do that. But you know what, you can also, when you wake up in the morning, before you open your eyes, you can just put your hands on yourself wherever you want, you know, maybe on your head or on your heart, you know, whatever feels good. And that is, excuse me, that is a show of love. You know, we are, the first thing that you do in the morning is love yourself. Show care and attention and affection and kindness to yourself.
Yeah.
So doing that even before you open your eyes, and you just sit there for a couple of minutes and just relax, but consciously doing something loving for yourself, I think is just, it really allows you then to get up and be in the day, express love for others. It gives you the opportunity to be able to be more open with others, because you feel that love. The love is there. It's at the top of everything, instead of that voice that's there telling you all this horrible stuff. You know, you're bringing something else into the mix, and you're allowing that to actually to be you.
Yeah. I love that. And I love the emphasis on the physical body, you know, because those stories and that shame and that negative self-talk that exists in the mind, right?
Yeah.
That's the chatter up here, right? And the system of Reiki is helping us to train our minds to really to not to hold on to whatever it is, whatever the thoughts are, but not, especially not those types of things, not to grip on, and to integrate that mind with the body, using the focus on the breath to help get us out of that cycle. And so one of the things that I often do with folks is, through a series of practices, help people to identify how those thoughts and how those sensations that they might, I'm angry at myself, or I'm ashamed, how they feel that in the body, right? Like, where do you feel that? Sometimes it's a clenching gut, or it's a fluttery heart, or it's like fidgeting hands, or it's a pain in the back that won't go away. How are you feeling that in your body? And then once we've identified that, to go into the Joshin Kokyoho practice, with some Tenahiro, with some hands-on practice, and place our hand in that place where we're experiencing that feeling of non-compassion, however it is that person has identified it. They're going to identify it different ways. And just spend a little bit of time, just focusing the attention on the hara as we inhale, and as we exhale, just drawing our attention to that place, and to cycle back and forth from this spacious, grounded, rooted place, this home of our true self, to the place where we're experiencing that negativity, that difficulty, just real gently, without trying to force anything to happen, without expecting it to be different, but just, as you say, just a moment of loving yourself with specific attention on where are the places where my body is holding that dislike, right? However that shows up. So that's often a way that I kind of work with people in a more gentle way around a resistance to just going fully into, just for today, I'm compassionate to myself.
And, the other thing you mentioned, which, is fundamental, is breath. And for me, that is just it's so meaningful. And bringing our consciousness to our breath throughout our day, not having to force anything, not do anything, but just bring your consciousness to your breath. What is your breath doing? So is it sitting up here? Is it, like doing all different sorts of things? But can you just bring it down a little lower? Can you bring it a little deeper? Can you just sit into the breath just naturally? And bringing that back and back and back and back is, by bringing it down, for example, into the hara, you're also bringing the mind down into the hara with the focus, so it's getting out of the head, getting away from all of that, and just allowing yourself to ground yourself simply by focusing on the breath, nothing more. So quite an easy practice as well to do.
And that's that's one of the things that's so magical about this practice, is that the practices are easy, right? They're simple. Simple. They're not necessarily easy to fully integrate. They're not necessarily easy to remember to do all the time. They're not necessarily easy to commit to, because we're so distracted in our life. But they're simple. They're accessible. And when we do commit to them, and we do work with them consistently over time, it's profound, the changes that we experience. And and then if we lapse on them, right, we don't do them for all, I have so many experiences where a student will come back after a period away and feel guilty about being away, about lapsing in their practice. And it's like, but it's still here. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's your practice and your light and your hara and your true self and your connection to all of life has not gone anywhere. And so, like, let's let go of that guilt, because it doesn't matter. Just for today, you choose to be in practice, and that's what matters. And we can get so caught up in that guilt and that shame, and it prevents us from engaging, right? When we feel like, oh, I've been away for too long, it actually prevents us from moving closer oftentimes. And so, working with guilt and shame can be such a powerful place to begin, or maybe even a place to end up. That's a remedy to that inability to be compassionate for ourselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was talking to a friend a little while ago about, the funny things that we do as people. I was just thinking about what you're talking about, the funny things that we do as people because of, maybe we've come from, dysfunctional backgrounds. I think most people have come from some sort of dysfunctional background, but, and how sometimes we react in ways, we do things that, other people think, why do they do that? Or why didn't they do that? Or, and you feel that. And then you have the guilt and the shame and you think, oh, I should have done that. But then you're feeling that. So you can't do that. And, we have this whole cycle of pain that we put ourselves through. And, I think just the awareness of that helps us to be so, once again, awareness of ourselves helps us to be so more compassionate to others, because we can see other people going through that, yeah. Other people messing up, other people not doing something or doing something that, is weird and seems out of place, but we too have that, but we need to just recognize it, in ourselves and feel compassion for that. As you said, put the spaciousness around it, allow it to be. And then, we can really understand others so much more and allow that compassion that we have then for ourselves to really just flow from us.
Yeah. And flowing from us, in a particular way that's about, as you said, really seeing each other, and not in a way that is permissive or like, that there's a weakness to it. I've it's easy to extend compassion to people we like. It's easy to extend compassion to people who are like us or who we have sympathy for. It becomes harder to extend compassion to people we don't like, people who feel really different from us, people who are perhaps even hurting us or hurting people that we love or doing really awful things. And yet this practice asks us, gently over time at the degree that we can on any given day, to expand that compassion outward from our own self into all aspects of life, which means even those people who are hurting us and doing awful things. Yeah. And, there's some pieces to that are important, firstly, to go at our own pace, right? To not try to connect with somebody where it feels dangerous or it feels off or anything like that. But to understand, first of all, that feeling compassion for somebody does not mean excusing bad behavior, right? It does not mean saying, well, I have compassion for you, so it's okay that you're hurting people. Not at all, right? But it's meeting that person at the level of true self, like at their core, at their true self, they are whole and they are just as much a part of the web of life as we are. And they are just as brilliant as we are. And through whatever circumstances of their life, they're making choices that are causing harm. We've made choices that have caused harm at various points in our life, almost invariably. And so can we meet people at the level of true self, at the level of the hara, at the level of, fundamentally, we are whole, healed, complete beings that are the same and that are connected and that are part of this larger web. And from that, can we look at behavior? Can we look at consequences of that behavior? Can we look at the ways in which we make mistakes and others make mistakes? Can we hold all of that inside of a container of compassion? And then from that place, it becomes so much easier to make different choices, right? Because it becomes so much harder to change a harmful behavior if we're doing that from a place of self-hatred or hatred of other people. But if we're doing that from a place of like, fundamentally, I am a good person and I love myself. Fundamentally, these people, are lovable and are good, at their center, no matter the layers of behavior. Change can flow from that place much more easily. Yeah. And so, there's this like kind of radical nature to truly following just for today, I'm compassionate to myself and others out to the full extent of of what that means. And, so many spiritual leaders from various traditions talk about this. I mean, the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu in particular in the Book of Joy and in other writings that they've done together, talk about this principle of loving people to the point where we can change, really despicable behavior. And the way in which we'll never get people to change by hating them, like ever. Right? We can only do that through compassion, but it has to be a compassion that's fortified. We have to be fortified in order to truly extend love and non-judgment, while at the same time naming things that are harmful. Right. And so it's a space of non-duality that really can change the world, when we can hold people in love and ask them to change at the same time.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
like that. It's it relates again to that idea that we this is, the self is one share, that we are all in it together, and that there is at some point, and I liked how you said that, but there is some point a commonality. So saying that, where is that commonality and how deeply can we go to find it? And sometimes we have to go really deep to remember that commonality, because there's not much else there that might actually be something that we can acknowledge as something that we like or can connect with, or whatever, so and finding at that really deep level that commonality is going to make the world of difference to how we feel about someone else. And when we change how we feel about someone else, they feel that, they know that,
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've probably said it before, but when we were talking about the Dalai Lama, but I love that thing that the Dalai Lama says, that we've all been each other's mother at some point, right? Through reincarnation. So we've all been each other's mother, and that that thing that we've all given birth to each other at some point. We've all loved unconditionally each other at some point. And the idea of that is enormous, and once again is a way of finding some deeper form of commonality that we know that we can love and just be love.
I mean, it's like some of the most powerful moments in our shared kind of collective history have come from the blending of love and accountability. Like I think about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa following apartheid, where there was like very serious truth telling and naming of atrocities and horrible things that had been done, person to person, and holding to account those behaviors, and doing that inside of a container of love, inside of a container of unity, of like, we're not going to break this country up. We're going to find a way to love ourselves and each other into some form of wholeness after some really horrible things. And, the experts in national and international relations at the time said it wasn't possible. It wasn't going to be possible for South Africa to remain a unified nation, to go through a process of actually holding accountability for what had been done, and at the same time not descending into violence. And yet it happened. Right. And the leadership of spiritual leaders who really held this non-dualistic view of love and accountability, that they both can and must occur in the same space, facilitated a miraculous experience across a nation. And that's duplicatable, right? It can happen inside of a single person, holding love and accountability for myself at the same time. It can happen interpersonally between people, and it can happen on larger scales. And, these are like, without striving and efforting for things kind of beyond our personal capacity, these are the things that are possible when we settle into a practice, integrate a practice that centers compassion as its purpose, at the foundation of the practice, which is what Reiki offers us. So it's exciting to me to think about that, right? That like in our personal way of working with this material, that the ripples of that outward really do impact each other in important ways.
Yeah, if we feel that intimacy with others, which is an open-heartedness in reality. Yeah. So that if we allow that open-heartedness with others, then we are existing in a space of oneness.
Yeah.
Because we invite everybody in to share that oneness. Yeah. I think we might finish up with that.
Yeah, that feels like the perfect place to rest, right? The perfect place to invite those of you who are listening to share with us your experiences with compassion for yourself, for others. Are there places where you struggle with that? Are there revelations that you've had when you paid attention to what it means to be in compassion? Are there questions that you have? Is there support that you need around working with these concepts? We'd love to hear from you, either by messaging us, by sharing down in the comments. And I'm sure there are people in your life who would benefit from spending a little bit of time focusing their attention on the idea of compassion. Just for today, I'm compassionate to myself and to others, and all that that can mean. So I invite you to share this podcast with them as a way of expanding this message and expanding what's possible when we focus our attention on this concept.
Thank you very much, Michaela. And I'm just going to say goodbye, good night, good morning, good day, wherever we are, and enjoy that openness, that spaciousness, that love. Challenge yourself and see if you can feel that in places that might be a little uncomfortable for you. And I'm going to try doing that. Okay.
All right. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.